The easy availability of music is something that all of us take for granted. Before the age of recording, a person could hear a particular piece of orchestral music, say in a concert hall, maybe once or twice a decade. Whereas now, music is available anywhere, anytime. But has recording spoilt us and numbed us to the excitement and drama of the real thing? The Big Bang that allowed music to be recorded was to change it forever. This program is about the Big Bang caused by the invention of recorded sound, the enormous effect it's had on music, and the way it's changed the perceptions and expectations of us listeners. Recording unleashed onto the 20th century a massive amount of music in a multitude of forms. It gave music wings to cross the planet. The impact of recorded music wasn't confined to the listening public alone. 20th century composers were also profoundly changed by it. They took the new sounds and styles that recording made available and used them in their own compositions. The invention of recording altered the course of musical history. When people first started dreaming of recording sound, music wasn't at the top of the agenda. In a book in 1649, the real-life writer Cyrano de Bergerac had a vision of a journey to the moon, whose inhabitants had amazing talking books. To Captain Bergerac and his moon dwellers, recording speech, not music, was the impossible goal. The dream became a reality in 1877 with the recording of a children's nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb. The machine that did it would turn its inventor into a household name, Thomas Alva Edison.
First words I spoke in the original phonograph, a little piece of practical poetry. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
A heritage museum in West Orange, New Jersey, honors the man responsible for this landmark achievement. The phonograph, as Edison called his new contraption, takes pride of place. A small thing that caused a big bang. The idea was this: you wrapped your tin foil around this cylinder, which you were able to turn with this handle here. Then you fix a needle into the middle of a diaphragm, which is inside here. And then you shout into this tube here as loudly as you can, and the vibrations caused by the sound bouncing against the diaphragm cause the needle to emboss the tin foil on the cylinder. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, her lamb was sure to go. Right, now we're going to see if that worked. Excellent. Edison himself said, "I was never so taken aback in my life when he discovered his crude machine actually worked." The phonograph, despite its somewhat primitive technology, immediately caught the imagination of an American public hungry for new inventions and novelties. Within 50 years, the idea of a world without recorded music would become unthinkable. For the time being, though, music would have to wait, as the tinfoil could only be used a couple of times and it became useless once it was taken off the machine. One-off, lo-fi recordings made with a drawing pin and a strip of Bako foil frankly weren't going to cut the mustard. A dramatic improvement came in the 1880s with the innovation of wax cylinders, which could be used again and again, and therefore sold to the public. You can even play them today. Soon after, someone had the bright idea of using phonographs in nickel-in-the-slot machines, and the jukebox was born. It quickly became a national craze. The Cincinnati Commercial Gazette of 1890 summed up the public mood. When a man can hear the 7th Regiment Band of New York play the Boulanger March, a cornet solo by Levi, or the famous song The Old Oaken Bucket for 5 cents, he has little desire to pay 5 cents to ascertain his weight or test the strength of his grip. Edison may have invented the machine. To his astonishment, it was public taste that determined its true destiny, the playing of music. What made the jukeboxes so instantly likeable was the choice of music available. Comic and sentimental songs, novelty acts from vaudeville, military bands, hymns, and light dancing tunes. No wonder the posh classical music world, patronising then as now, turned their noses up at the new medium. Sir Arthur Sullivan of Gilbert and Sullivan fame was typical of many.
I am astonished and somewhat terrified. Astonished at the wonderful power you have developed, and terrified at the thought that so much hideous, bad music may be put on record forever.
For the next 100 years, classical musicians were to echo Sullivan's complaint about the huge popularity of music they considered to be inferior. But there were isolated examples of classical music finding its way onto early wax cylinders. A live recording of Handel's epic oratorio Israel and Egypt was made at the Crystal Palace in London in 1888 and is thought to be the earliest surviving music recording in existence. To make it, 2 blokes sat all evening in the balcony with a tiny phonograph machine poked over the edge. It's amazing they got anything, really. Given the appalling quality of the sound reproduction, it's hardly surprising that classical musicians were slow to come forward to make recordings. Since the records only lasted 2 minutes, the music too had to be crudely hacked about to fit. Yet another serious drawback was that the only way to produce discs for sale was to record the piece again and again into a number of cylinders at once, known as gang recordings. Even then, it might take a whole day to record 200 copies of the same 2-minute song. What was needed was a way to mass-produce recordings. The ingenious Emil Berliner solved the problem with the invention of the flat disc gramophone. Because it recorded onto a master disc, an unlimited number of copies could be made, rather like the process of running off prints from a photographic negative. This is one of the first ever Berliner single-sided discs, which was meant to run at 120 revolutions per minute or thereabouts. On the back it actually had the words for you in case you couldn't hear what they were singing. And at 5 inches across, it's remarkably similar to a modern CD. Later, Berliner's rubber discs were replaced by shellac, a material made, believe it or not, from crushed Malaysian beetles. In London, Emil Berliner's representatives had formed what was to become today's EMI, the Gramophone Company, which became world famous not just because of its recording output, but also because of a dog. Nipper here, in a portrait called His Master's Voice, became one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Whilst under no illusion that popular music was to be the real honeypot, the gramophone company nevertheless longed for respectability. This was something, they believed, that only classical music could bring. So they went about exploiting a fashion amongst the bourgeoisie for grand opera. Verdi had only died in 1901, and his successors, most of all Puccini, were alive and active. The turn of the century was for many a golden age of opera. The gramophone company began a determined effort to ensnare the top operatic stars into the recording business. They even gave them their own red label to make them seem like champagne amidst all the rest of the commercial plonk on offer. They weren't just interested, though, in the already famous stars of the time. Indeed, their most astonishing breakthrough came with a young, up-and-coming tenor from Naples, Enrico Caruso, who became the most famous singer in the world. The man who was to become the toast of the Western world began life in what was then, as now, one of the poorest cities in Europe. With Caruso's rise to stardom, the gramophone was transformed from an interesting but train-spotterish novelty into a populist worldwide phenomenon. Enrico Caruso was one of 7 children born to a working-class family in this house in the Via San Giovannello. As a teenager, Caruso made a few lira every night, singing Neapolitan songs for the cafe customers on the waterfront. He died in the luxury hotel opposite 30 years later, unimaginably wealthy from the royalties of his million-selling discs. It was while he was working the waterfront trattorias that the young Caruso was discovered. Before long, he turned professional. At the age of 27, he was invited to sing at the holiest of all opera's shrines, La Scala, Milan. It was here that Caruso attracted the interest of one of the most important pioneers of the industry, the gramophone company's chief recording engineer and talent spotter, Fred Geisberg. This was to be the recording world's equivalent of Stanley meeting Livingston. They decided to make their first recording just up the road from the Opera House in Caruso's suite at the Grand Hotel. A deal was struck to make 10 records for £100, much to the horror of Geisberg's London office, which sent a blunt telegram saying, "Fee exorbitant, forbid you to record." But on April the 11th, 1902, Geisberg backed his hunch and went ahead anyway. In this very room in the Grand Hotel, in just 2 hours, those 10 records were cut that made gramophone history. Fittingly, the first record made was an aria from Caruso's current La Scala success, Franchetti's Germania. After the release of the 10 records, Caruso's reputation quickly spread across Europe and America. For the first time ever, an artist was booked to appear at the Metropolitan Opera in New York simply on the strength of a recording. Until his death in 1921, Caruso made over 200 records, achieving a worldwide fame that no singer had ever had before. Caruso was the first recording megastar. It's often said that the gramophone made Caruso. Perhaps it's fairer to say that Caruso made the gramophone. Caruso's Vesti la Giubba from Leoncavallo's opera I Pagliacci was the world's first million-selling disc. Here's the man himself appearing in a silent movie. This is what it would have sounded like if films in 1918 had had sound as well. Caruso's voice had a timbre and range that perfectly suited the limitations of the medium. It could soar and tremble with such strength that the background hiss and the distant accompaniment were all but forgotten. To many people, hearing Caruso scale the summits of high opera was both miraculous and moving. It wasn't just their first experience of the true potential of the gramophone, it was also a gateway to the whole classical repertoire. Edison's Big Bang became a universal gift with the popularity of Caruso, and classical music was catapulted out of the small, secret world it had hitherto known. Thanks to his success, all the other top singers of the day now dropped their objections to recording once they realized that it could take their voices into the world.